I still can't quite believe what just happened. I know. I inquired with the bailiff after the court session was adjourned. And it seems Mr. Vigil was taken to hospital to recover. Right. 10 years ago now. Mr. Vigil attempted to commit suicide by jumping out of the window of the prison governor's office. But ever since then, he's completely blocked the memory of those events from his mind. Nobody knew his secret. Not his family, not even the man himself. But I forced it out into the open. I'd kind of say more Kazuma forced it out in the open. You just kind of went along for the ride. Was it wrong of me to do that? Did I overstep the mark, I wonder? Bruno! Oh, Iris. You were miles away. Anyway, I brewed a fresh pot of soothing tea for you. Oh, thank you. You and Susie have had an exhausting day so far, haven't you? Gregson's dead, yes! Oh. Thank you, Iris. How thoughtful of you. Do you happen to know where Mr. Sholmes is? When we came out of the courtroom back into the defendant's antechamber, he disappeared. Oh, no, I don't know. He just suddenly sprang to his feet and left. All he said was, "I must leave." I wonder if he's pursuing the mystery of Inspector Gregson's death. Well, you know what Hurley is always saying, don't you? There are mysteries in this world that should perhaps never be solved. But the construction of a solution comes only at the expense of the destruction of something else. What does that mean? He knows very well that when you open someone else's old wounds, you often open your own too. But he just can't take his own advice and leave well alone. Solving mysteries is too important to him. That's so true. But that's what I like about Hurley after all. I suppose that's the lot of a great detective in some ways. So then, let's have tea, and then I'll give you a hand. Oh, do you have time, Iris? Yes, I finished this month's manuscript at last, with barely a day to spare before the deadline. Oh, I'm so looking forward to it. A brand new story to read in The Adventures of Sherlock Sholmes. You know, I always hide Hurley's violin in the days before I have a deadline. You do? Poor Mr. Sholmes. I'm sure that's very wise, Iris. How sensible of you. Now then, my dear Phillips, let's make a plan of action before we continue our investigation. Let's chat. So, this morning's trial, what did you think about the man who passed out with a horrified expression on his face? So, how did it go in court this morning? Horribly. Well, we still don't know the truth about what really happened, but one thing's increasingly clear. Lord Van Zieks definitely didn't do it. Oh, goody. Yes, that's right. We managed to uncover several new facts as well. Oh, really? And there was another development too. Kazuma. Yes, it's quite clear now that Kazuma-sama is not himself. The way he's acting, it's almost as if he's possessed. I know. I mean, at the end of the proceedings earlier, he was like a bloodhound the way he was chasing down Mr. Vigil's forgotten past. He's not normally so mercilessly persistent. What's going on in his head, I wonder? I really need to sit down with Kazuma and try to understand what he's going through. So about what we're actually supposed to be doing right now. If Gregson was really murdered the day before his body was discovered, then Lord Van Zieks has to be innocent, you see? What? The day before? Well, that should be easy enough to work out. Just by examining the corpse, surely. Yes, you would expect so, but curiously, no time of death was included in the autopsy report. That is curious. There are still unanswered questions about Lord Van Zieks, though, aren't there? Do you mean... I mean, what was he doing there on Fresno Street that day in the first place? Well, according to the man's testimony, he said he was investigating Inspector Gregson, didn't he? And it turns out that little room was actually the inspector's secret office. Ooh, that sounds like it has all the makings of a wonderfully devilish plot. But then why was that notice board in there covered in all of those peculiar papers? Papers about cases with a link to the Reaper. I'm starting to get a bad feeling about all this. Oh dear, that sounds more like something horribly devilish. We must start by looking into Inspector Gregson's movements of late. Speaking of which, I never imagined I might have to be investigating an inspector's movements. Well, according to the entry in his diary, he was carrying out an incognito investigation of the red-headed leak the day before his death. Oh, you mean he was doing the same as Hurley? Well, Mr. Sholmes was trying to apply, whereas the inspector was supposed to be investigating. I do wish it had been the other way around. Anyway, as it turns out, the inspector who went to investigate the red-headed leak that day wasn't actually Gregson at all. It was Mr. Vigil, in possession of Gregson's identification. You know what that sounds like to me? Establishing an alibi. Oh my! Yes, you're absolutely right, Iris! But why would Gregson need an alibi? It would appear that the inspector had something to do that he wished to keep secret. I don't believe it. I always thought he was just a harmless lover of fish and chips. But perhaps they were seasoned with something a little more potent than salt and vinegar. I think perhaps we should try to move away from food analogies. Fair enough. Well, anyway, if Lord Van Zieks felt the need to investigate Gregson... Yes, I agree. We must try to find out what he knows. Vigil, you say? Isn't that the name of the lady who came to visit Hurley yesterday? That's right, to ask Mr. Sholmes if he would help her to find her missing husband. Only Mr. Sholmes completely passed the buck to us. Actually, didn't you say that Mr. Vigil had been taken to hospital? Do you know which one? Ah, it's St. Siner's. Of course it is. I'm starting to wonder if all the other hospitals in London have closed. Ryunosuke and I once again sharing a single brain. What is going on? We're literally thinking the exact same things in real time. But that's amazing, Runo. You found the lady's husband already. Well, I suppose I have, by accident. And 10 years ago, while Mr. Vigil was the chief warder at the prison, he was responsible for overseeing the professor's incarceration. No! So when the convict escaped, he was held responsible and immediately dismissed. Sometimes I really don't want to grow up. Same, Iris. There's more. For 10 years after that, while he was ostensibly working as a peddler, he also had another secret job. He was paid by Gregson to be his stand-in to impersonate the inspector. To impersonate Gregson? But why? I have absolutely no idea. Jeannie was right. I'm starting to think all adults are up to no good now. Shame! Including you, Runo. Fine. I haven't paid anyone to impersonate me. That means he has ties to the professor and to Inspector Gregson, though. So I do think we ought to pay a visit to Mr. Vigil, don't you? No. Like, I know that we have to, but I think I'm one of, like, 2 people that he absolutely should not be seeing right now. I forced him to relive his attempted suicide. We're not doing that. Back to St. Sinners, then. Well, I think it's clear what we need to do, isn't it? Let us investigate, my dear fellows. Oh, Iris. You're even more enthusiastic than usual today. If anyone has anything to hide, my special Wilson shooting iron will soon set them straight. When I shoot them. That water pistol? It's stuffed with full of a piping hot extra special blend of mine. Okay, you know what? Actually, that's a legitimate threat. Shooting water is harmless, but shooting hot water, that would hurt. Then I'm quite sure it'll be very effective. Yes, it will. I better be careful not to hide anything. Well, it's a little strange that Mr. Sholmes is nowhere to be seen, but still. Let's go and see what we can find out. Yes! Alright, well, so I know that we could go to Mr. Vigil's hospital bed. I actually want to go to the Lord Chief Justice's office because I want to focus on Kazuma first. Assuming he's there. Yay! My favorite boy and my not so favorite boy. Don't get me wrong, I do like Lord Strongheart, but he is very intimidating. No arguments, Prosecutor Asogi. You will continue with the trial exactly as I instructed. Is that clear? Perfectly. It's Kazuma-sama! Defying Lord Strongheart by the sound of it. He never did know when to back down. On your way now, Asogi. My lord. Kazuma. He left without saying a word. Yes? What are you doing here? Oh, well, I was just hoping to ask you a few questions, if you wouldn't mind. I wanted Van Zieks' trial concluded today. But Prosecutor Asogi's unwelcome inquiries are going to make it take longer than necessary. Unwelcome inquiries? As a result, I'm losing even more precious time. Currently 2 hours, 55 minutes, and 41 seconds. 42, 43... Then we must resolve everything before 3 hours have passed for Sunaruhodo. In a miraculous not even 5 minutes. Anyway, I can't let the man's obvious bad mood put me off. I need information. Yeah, I'm sorry it was not an open and shut case, but he didn't do it? But we don't have enough evidence to prove who did it, because apparently that's also our job. Does Prosecutor Asogi believe that Lord Van Zieks is the Reaper? I wouldn't know. It was 10 years ago, in that fateful close trial, that Lord Van Zieks made a name for himself among the judiciary. But the next trial he fought, he lost. It meant the ringleader of a criminal organization was acquitted, thanks to all the jurors being under duress. But that's awful! The man's freedom was short-lived. He lasted just 3 days. Yes, let me see. He died in a rock slide at his place of work, I believe. What? How? Where did he work? Correct. That was the inauguration of the Reaper of the Bailey. And people believed Lord Van Zieks was responsible? He was brought to trial himself. but it was shown to have been an accident. So he must have had a solid alibi then. Nevertheless, the mysterious deaths continued. In total, 16 persons perished in unusual circumstances, ostensibly at the hand of the Reaper. That's a long run of coincidences. Well, the Reaper's true identity may well be revealed by this trial. And the impact that revelation would have on British public cannot be understated. Okay, I just had a scary thought, but I'm gonna save that for later. Is that why it's a closed trial? Precisely. This country hasn't seen a closed trial for 10 years. So the last one was the professors? The trial of Genshin Asogi? Correct. Actually, we heard that originally you were going to prosecute that trial yourself, Lord Strongheart. Van Zieks entreated me to relinquish the prosecution to him, that he might avenge his brother's death. And here we are, 10 years later, with the son of the man Van Zieks condemned now looking to avenge his father's death in the same way. They do say that what goes around comes around. However, it would seem that the new young prosecutor is harboring some ulterior motive as well. Kazuma is? Yeah, I like my organization to run smoothly, in the exact manner that I prescribe. As with the giant clock in here, I won't tolerate a single cog being out of step with the others. Ah, so that's what all these gears are about in here. If the young man refuses to mesh with the other parts of my great machine, I will be forced to take steps. What? What do you mean? Not something with which you need concern yourself. He's my best friend. Anything you do to him, I will talk to you about. In any case, all your questions will be answered tomorrow. What do you mean? Now, I shall have to ask you to excuse me. As at this moment, I've been delayed from attending my next meeting by precisely 3 hours. Oh my! That is a long time. And I hold you entirely responsible. No! Even though we miraculously managed to fit everything into not even 5 minutes? I wonder if you might agree to us, talking with Prosecutor Asogi? Discussions between the defense and the prosecution outside the courtroom are generally frowned upon. However, I will make an exception in this case. Now go. You can find him in his office. Oh, thank you. He has an office? Let's go see him at once, Mr. Nahodo. Kazuma's my best friend in the world, but I'm really not at all sure how to talk to him at the moment. Before we go to Kazuma, I actually want to check on Van Zieks, because it's been a hot minute since we've talked to him. Okay, we're going to be going in a lot of different directions today. This particular investigation is, from what I've gathered, it's very, very long. Lord Van Zieks is reading. Look. Yes. He doesn't seem like he wants visitors, does he? But he must have noticed that we're here, surely. What do you Nipponese want? Hey, one of us is British. That's no way to greet the lawyer who's trying his hardest to prove your innocence, is it? Perhaps not. I apologize. So, what can I do for you, Mr. Naruto? God, I love you! Lord Van Zieks, speaking earnestly. Oh, the fog will lift over London for the first time in months tomorrow. This does feel very, very strange. I must say, I was impressed. Oh, well, thank you. Not by you, by your fellow Nipponese, your prosecutor friend. Oh, I see, yes. It's sardonic, don't you think? For a man such as me, so loathing of the Nipponese, to be entirely at the mercy of the two of you. I suppose. It's retribution for having played the part of the Reaper all these years. Played the part? You once told me that you gladly allowed people to believe you were the Reaper, because it helped reduce the amount of serious crime that took place in London. If keeping quiet and playing the part benefits the cause, a cause I myself am committed to pursuing, then why would I choose to say anything? But the henchman of a criminal killed by the Reaper attacked you only the other day. And that was just the most recent of many attempts on your life, wasn't it? Someone is clearly profiting from your silence about all this. Someone is using you. Believe me, ever since the Reaper first appeared, I've been doing my utmost to expose him. Or rather, expose the organization. Ah! It's a whole organization? It's inconceivable that all those accidents were orchestrated by one man. No, the Reaper always appears to have very accurate information about the accused in each case. Which can only mean that somebody at Scotland Yard is involved. Someone at... You can't mean... It's taken me many years, but I finally identified the central figure in this Reaper organization. Tobias Gregson. Yeah, I had a suspicion. No! Gregson, the Reaper? Yeah, I had a suspicion earlier, but I didn't want to say anything. So about that. So, the reason you were investigating Inspector Gregson is because you intended to expose him as the Reaper? As I said, the Reaper of the Bailey is no single person. It's a highly secret organization with close ties to Scotland Yard. But there's no doubt that Gregson was a key member of that organization. I don't believe it. Are you saying that that he was behind all those awful criminals, meaning they're... Gregson didn't do the dirty work himself. Oh. He was the tactician. His job was to covertly investigate the marks and plot their assassinations. In order to do that without arousing suspicion, he regularly needed a firm alibi. Which is where Mr. Vigil came in, posing as the inspector. Vigil knows nothing of the Reaper. But the room he rents on Fresno Street is almost certainly the headquarters of the operation. Gregson would have met the assassin there for briefings. So we don't actually know who carried out the killings then. Actually, I do have a name. You... What? Well, if you can name the man, you have the true identity of the Reaper already then. Or, if I can name the woman. What? No, stop. Don't tell me. Oh. She's a young woman by the name of Assassin. Get it? Assassin? Assassin? Wait, what? Shin? Miss Asashin, the true name of a terrifying killer I know only too well. She came to Japan posing as a visiting student and murdered Dr. John H. Wilson. Then, just when it seemed that diplomatic prosecution would help her escape Japan and conviction, the mysterious woman was herself murdered in a small summer beach hut. And that woman was actually the Reaper of the Bailey? That doesn't make sense. Well, not entirely. Mr. Nanaho, though, this perhaps isn't the place to discuss. No, of course not. We can't mention it here. The fact that she killed Dr. John H. Wilson. Because Iris doesn't know, and it's very likely that the man was her father. Assassin. I should let father know at once. Yes, I agree. Okay, we will do that, but we need to talk about Prosecutor Asogi. Kazuma, isn't it? Kazuma Asogi? You say he's a friend of yours. My best friend. He's the whole reason I got to come to Britain. It was all on his merits. I have nothing but respect for him. Yes, I understand that only the best students are selected for such opportunities. And I had a fine demonstration of how sharp he is in the proceedings earlier today. He missed nothing. In fact, his flawless performance very much reminded me of his father. Genshin Asogi, the professor. It's true that the aristocracy at the time was the root of numerous grave societal problems. They were abusing their power, playing with the common man as pawns in politics, in economics, in war. In many ways, Asogi was carving out a canker from society that we British couldn't deal with ourselves. I see. But that's precisely why it makes no sense. Clint Van Zieks was a noble and upstanding man. He wasn't corrupt. Why did that damn Nipponese have to go and take my brother's life? In spite of having once saved mine. Oh, he saved your life? How did that happen? It was 10 years ago on a foggy night. Did every other thing in this game happen 10 years ago? What was to be the professor's final strike had sent a wave of panic through the capital. So Clint Van Zieks had already been killed at this point then. Genshin and I were walking down some back streets at a late hour. Of course, at that point, I had no idea of the true nature of the man at my side. All of a sudden... Don't make a peek. You're coming with us. We were surrounded. All of our assailants were armed with pistols, their faces obscured by scarves. Clint was not only from noble heritage, he was a brilliant prosecutor as well. The scum of London hated the sight of him, and they had no sympathy for his younger brother either. I'd been targeted several times before already. Jesus! Yeah, it's Van Zieks, alright. We've got him! I could hear them murmuring amongst themselves. I knew they were after me. But just when I thought my time had come... If I let them kill you, Clint would never forgive me. It was Asogi's voice, just a whisper in my ear. After that, I don't remember exactly what happened. The next thing I knew, there was silence all around. Genshin lay on the cobbled street. Blood was seeping from his left hand. He'd shielded me. Two days later, they arrested him. On suspicion of being London's most notorious mass murderer ever. The Professor. How awful for you. All at once, I lost the brother I revered, and the foreign friend I held in such high regard. I'm so sorry, Lord Van Zieks. That's the end of my miserable tale. I never thought I'd recount it to anyone. Well, thank you for confiding in me. The Professor, the Reaper, and Inspector Gregson. I wonder just how intimately related they all are. I still can't quite believe that Gregson was essentially the Reaper. Giving assassination orders to Giselle Brett? Mr. Naruhodo, let's go and inform my father. I'm sure our government will want to hear about this new information. Oh, that means I get to meet your daddy, Susie. Hooray! Yes, alright. Let's head back to the Great Waterloo Hotel then. Okay, we will actually do that. I'm not gonna jump around to just another arbitrary thing. We will be going to Great Waterloo Hotel. I thought it yesterday, and I think it again today. This place is so princely. It's a wild guess, but I have a feeling you'll think the same tomorrow, too. My tea has a finer fragrance than whatever they're serving in the tea room here, though, wouldn't you say? Ah, look who we have here. This is an unexpected pleasure. Ah, Father! Oh, is this your daddy, Susie? How lovely! What a charming young lady! And you are? One introduction later. Ah, really? So you're the author of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, are you? That's me, Iris Wilson, at your service, sir. Susie's been such a wonderful friend to me over the last year, you know? Well, Miss Wilson, I must say I read your work regularly and with much interest. Iris actually lives with Mr. Sholmes, you know, Father. Is that so? Well, perhaps that goes some way to explaining the bright look in your eyes. Aw, she's adorable. You wouldn't be smiling so airily if you knew just how bright she is, believe me. Now then, young Naruhodo, it was a pleasure seeing you in action earlier. As an invitee of the symposium, I was allowed to observe from the gallery, after I twisted some arms. And I must say, it was a truly exemplary performance. Oh, well, thank you very much. Although I'm fairly sure you omitted by Kazuma on the end there. No, please don't misunderstand. It was you who impressed me. Really? You didn't miss a step against Asogi, and we all know how capable he is. Really, to have matured into such a fine defense lawyer in less than a year is quite extraordinary. It's very kind of you to say so, and really nice to hear. What I saw in court today confirmed what I'd been hoping for. The favor I mentioned yesterday, Naruhodo, I trust you haven't forgotten? Oh, no, you didn't mention something, didn't you? But first, we have something to report, Father. Of course. Shall we take tea while we discuss matters further? I wonder where Judge Jigoku has got to. Alright, well, let's take a sec to converse with him, because now we have more to give him. Father, do you know about the so-called Reaper of the Bailey? I've heard rumors. Some members of the judiciary explained it all to me yesterday. Of course, when I was a visiting student here in London, the Reaper was yet to emerge. Right. He didn't appear until after the case when the visiting students had already returned home. Lord Van Zieks, who was in the dock today. That was Barrick, the younger brother of Clint Van Zieks, I believe. That's right. And he's known throughout London as the Reaper, as you've heard. But the truth is, It wasn't him behind all those mysterious deaths. It was somebody else. I see. So what you're saying is, there's been a professional killer at work here. Exactly. Somebody by the name of Assassin, in fact. I beg your pardon? Did you say Assassin? You mean the Giselle Brett woman who was responsible for killing my great friend? Oh no! A friend of yours was killed? Who was he? Professor Mikotoba, I think perhaps we shouldn't discuss this right now. Because the friend of the professor is talking about is Dr. John H. Wilson. And that's not something we want Iris to find out about. Let's talk about it anyway. Just rip the band-aid off. I just remembered something. Biscuits! This hotel has the most delicious looking biscuits. That was rather out of the blue. She's doing this deliberately. I think I'll go and see if I can purchase some. I wonder, would you like to come too, Iris? Oh, yes. You just try to leave me behind. So that young girl is called Iris Wilson, is she? Yes, that's right. And she's the author of all those adventure stories starring the great detective Sholmes? But the name of the credit author isn't Iris, is it? It's Dr. John H. Wilson. Yes, I know. That's the name of her father, you see. Her father? Dr. John H. Wilson. I was deeply indebted to the man for all the kindness he showed me during my time in London. That's why I was keen to reciprocate and invite him to the Imperial Yume University 4 years ago. But he was murdered last year by Giselle Brett. Why? Why would the hand of the Reaper stretch all the way to Japan? Iris knows nothing about that case, but it seems very likely that the victim, Dr. Wilson, was her father. Well, I can't say that we ever spoke about his family, so I don't know if he had a daughter or not. But I think I can say with some certainty that he was never the great detective's partner. So, it could have been another Dr. Wilson, you think? Well, John and Wilson are both common names after all. Still, it's probably best not to mention this to the young lady until we can be sure. That's what we thought, yes. We're back! With cinnamon biscuits! Oh, they smell delicious, Iris. I think cinnamon will go very well with the tea they serve here. Don't you, Susie? Yes, I'm sure you're right, Iris. Okay, well, glad that we were able to establish what not to talk about. Let's talk about what we should talk about, which is Jigoku, apparently. I haven't seen Judge Jigoku for a while. Have you? Guilty! Guilty. But that guilty is still ringing in my ears. No, now that you mention it, I haven't seen him since this morning either. I suppose since the symposium's opening was postponed, he'll have gone to explore at the Great Exhibition. That reminds me of something you mentioned yesterday. About Judge Jigoku having once been in the dock himself? Ah, yes. It was all tied up with that accursed trial. The closed trial of Kazuma's father. Seisho was trying to mitigate Genshin's guilt, so he took to the stand to testify. But he got a little carried away and, actually managed to break the witness stand. I have no comment, that's just impressive. Oh my! He also said some contemptuous words about the British Empire, for which he was charged. Oh dear. Although it's worryingly easy to imagine him doing that. Well, it was all right in the end. He was acquitted and we returned home to Japan together. Thank goodness. Yes, talking of Seishiro. I have a copy of the photograph we all took together here yesterday. Please. Aw. Oh, what a lovely picture. It certainly seems to shout, "We've arrived in Britain!" The commemorative photograph has been entered into the court record. A photograph taken in the foyer of the Great Waterloo Hotel of the morning Professor Mikotoba and Judge Jigoku's arrival in London for the symposium. None of us had any idea what was coming when we took that, did we? No, that's so true. About that favor, still not clear on that. So, you mentioned a favor that you'd like to ask me? Well, this fateful trial that you're fighting, one way or another, it will be over before long. And when it is, I'd like you to accompany me back to Japan. What? You want me to do... What? Father, what's the meaning of this? Now, Susato, you should understand. You've seen how our courts work firsthand. Japan's judicial system, it's in its infancy, especially when it comes to defense. Oh, you mean... The Supreme Court of Judiciary is in desperate need of a good defense lawyer. As soon as possible. Really quite urgently, in fact. But I've not even been in London a year yet. I've read all Sudato's reports. I'm well aware of your extraordinary talents. And having seen you in action with my own eyes earlier today, there's no question. You, Naruhodo, are precisely the man our country needs. So, you'd be leaving then, Runo? But then, what am I supposed to do, Father? You came here to serve as Asogi's judicial assistant. Oh, yes, she's supposed to be Kazuma's assistant. Our government is still in the process of deciding how best to deal with this situation, though. You've always chosen your own path, Susato. And I trust your judgment. In this matter also. Father! Please, the pair of you, don't look so downcast. It's merely a suggestion, you understand. A hope, if I'm honest. But I won't force you. All I ask is that you consider it, and come to a decision by the time this trial concludes. Yes, alright. You won't leave me, will you, Runo? Oh, Iris. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. Up until now, I've just been trying to do what I believe to be Kazuma's will. But it turns out that he's still alive, so... where does that leave me? Well, if you'll excuse me now, I need to telegraph government ministries and the Japanese police for this information about Asashin. Of course, Father. Thank you. I look forward to next month's installment, Mrs. Wilson. Oh, good! And please do come back to Baker Street sometime, won't you? We'd love to entertain you. I would be delighted. The best of luck for tomorrow, Naruhodo. And give my suggestion your full consideration, won't you? Yes, I will. Going back home. You know, Kazuma-sama has always meant a great deal to my father. I'm sure he'd love the chance to meet with him and talk to him about all this. Yes, no doubt. Asashin. Of course! It's so obvious! How could I have neglected to consider the possibility before now? I hate you. Ah, Mr. Sholmes! Hurley, where have you been? Why, I joined you all for tea, of course. What an extraordinary question. I didn't notice you at all. No matter, no matter. Anyway, to more pressing concerns, Mr. Naruhodo. Oh, yes? I must dispatch a telegram to your country at once. It is a matter of much urgency. To Japan, you mean? Tell me, to whom can I entrust the task? Quickly now, who? Ah, well... My father has just now left to send a telegram to the Imperial Police Bureau of Japan himself. I see. Well, he looked reliable enough for a bearded fellow. I don't think what father sports could be considered a beard, Mr. Sholmes. There's not a moment to lose. Kindly ask your trusty unshaven father to see this is sent. I will, but what is it? No questions at this time, if you please, Mrs. Otto. All we can do is pray that for once, my deduction is awry. Doesn't that imply that your deductions are normally correct, Mr. Sholmes? Which isn't exactly... Now then! You may be surprised to learn that I'm a very busy man. I certainly have no time to hide behind CDs and eavesdrop on other people's conversations. So that's what joining us for tea meant. I leave the sending of this in your hands then, my dear fellows. Ah! Wait a minute, Mr. Sholmes! He just sort of ran off, didn't he? At quite a pace. And left the unpaid bill for his tea behind, too. I must catch up with father at the telegraph office. At once! And I'll run and call us a cab. Straight away! And there was me thinking everyone would be clamoring to pay Mr. Sholmes' bill. Well, seeing as I have no choice, I think we're finally going to go ahead and stop by Mr. Vigil's hospital bed. I think we have put that off for long enough. This is the ward where Mr. Vigil was brought, apparently. To be frank, I'm a little worried about seeing him again. Ah, the lawyer. Hello again. Are you feeling better now, Mr. Vigil? Yes, thank you. Somewhat better. I'm so sorry to have caused you to... I mean, it was because of me. If I hadn't exposed your secret and forced you to remember things you'd obviously try to forget... The prosecutor was here until a few moments ago, too. You just missed him. Oh, Kazuma beat us to it. He said much the same as you. He was very apologetic. But the truth is, I brought all this upon myself. Please, don't think like that. Keeping it from Evie, my wife, all these years, I've carried such a sense of guilt. But that's not the worst of it. Over time, I obviously came to deceive myself as well. You mean about your dismissal? Looking back now, I'm beginning to think that perhaps Inspector Gregson didn't stumble across me by accident at all. I mean, he compensated me so generously for acting as his stand-in. He was clearly concerned for my well-being and doing what he could to help. So perhaps Gregson knew exactly what had become of Mr. Vigil all along then. I'm sure this is just desserts for 10 years of lies and deception, but... It wasn't me that helped the professor escape 10 years ago. It wasn't me! I swear it! I swear it's true! Oh, Mr. Vigil. I'm sure you'd rather not dredge up even more from your past at this time, but if possible, could you tell us exactly what really happened? I want to. I need to get all this off my chest. I just want someone to tell me what I should have done. Alright, well, let's try to break this down. Inspector Gregson was obviously engaged in a special operation of some sort. He was investigating something that even Scotland Yard couldn't know about. Details of the Reaper's marks, yes. It was when he had to carry out those investigations that I would take his identification and impersonate him. You pretended to be the inspector and carry out investigations on his behalf? Oh, no, never! A common street peddler couldn't possibly carry out a proper police investigation. All I would do is go to the specified location and make a little hoo-ha. Just something to leave an impression, so everyone there would think a detective called Gregson was here. So, that's what you were doing on the day prior to the incident? Yes. He asked me to make an appearance at the park on Lime Street for the Red-Headed League event. So, as usual, I flashed the inspector's identification around and was very vocal about my presence. But then you were taken prisoner by those red-headed fraudsters. Yes. So, you would have always make a point of showing Gregson's identification and generally being loud? That's what the inspector asked me to do, yes. Well, that's one way of becoming a legendary detective, I suppose. Not a good one, though. And as you know, I suffered this bruise around my neck at their hands. But the following day, they kept their word and released me. Without returning the inspector's identification to you, however. We had arranged to meet in the Fresno Street room at 5 that day so I could report back to the inspector. But at the agreed time, that's when I heard the gunshot. Okay, well, enough about that. Let's talk about what caused you to make some poor choices. I'm gonna try not to make any jokes about that. It was at midnight on the 17th of June, 10 years ago. That was the time scheduled for the execution. But the professor's execution never actually took place, did it? Or rather, the execution itself must have been used to effect the plan of escape. I hardly dare to imagine what a chilling plan it was. Barclay was renowned for being the highest security prison in the country. Everything that went in or out of the place was searched multiple times. But there was one notable exception. Or rather, one notable loophole. Something that was never questioned. I have a feeling I know what that loophole was now. The coffins into which the bodies of the executed convicts were placed, correct? Yes. Once the coroner had confirmed the death of a condemned convict, the body was taken in its coffin for immediate burial in Locate Cemetery just behind the prison. The chief warder first had to sign the necessary papers. And after that, no member of staff was permitted to touch the coffin containing the body again. When the executions took place, only the executioner and the coroner were permitted inside the chamber. I would wait in the adjacent room for word that the condemned convict was dead. On that occasion, once I had that confirmation, I went into the mortuary to find a lone coffin, as usual. The procedure was that I would sign the paperwork having checked the coffin, then nail it shut. The coffin was already nailed shut. Oh no! I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed that my deputy must have checked the coffin and nailed it shut before I arrived. So, you mean the coffin contained... Yes, I can only imagine that Asogi, having escaped his execution somehow, was alive inside the coffin. The coffin was taken out through the main gates and deposited in Lowgate Cemetery. Presumably, there wouldn't have been enough air inside to breathe for long. So in the early hours following the burial, somebody dug up the coffin again to set Genshin free. But in the end, he was fatally shot in the graveyard anyway. What on earth really happened in Lowgate Cemetery that night, I wonder? I'm afraid I really don't know. All I can say with certainty are two things. Asogi couldn't possibly have escaped that way without help from somebody working in the prison. And that somebody was not me. What about him? Obviously, you knew the man then. The professor, I mean. Genshin Asogi. Yes, I remember him well, in fact. Would you mind telling us what you know? Well, having been condemned to death as he was, any contact I had with the man was short, obviously. After that trial, which was carried out behind closed doors, attended only by elite members of the judiciary, they called for his execution to be carried out at the earliest possible opportunity. The outcome of the trial was set from the beginning, wasn't it? It was a time of delicate diplomacy when Britain and Japan were in the process of signing an important treaty. That meant that this potentially destabilizing case had to be dealt with swiftly and discreetly. The man had less than a week in total. As I was the chief warder, I oversaw his short stay in the cells until his final hour. I remember being struck deeply by his noble character and incredible resilience. What do you mean, exactly? He was a killer of many men, but he was always quiet and polite. He was a gentleman and a man of intellect. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to believe what he'd done, so I asked him one day. Those five members of the aristocracy whose lives were taken, were you really responsible? I'm guilty of the unforgivable crime of any another human's life. Yes. The following day, the closed trial took place, and the verdict was no surprise. Guilty. That night, when he was brought back to his cell, I saw something. Something unusual. Something unusual? What? The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. As I said, it was on the night following his trial after he'd been found guilty. I was doing the rounds of the cells, and when I looked into Asogi's... I noticed that he seemed to have a sheet of paper in his hand. Ah, his last will and testament then, presumably. As soon as he noticed me, he hurriedly shoved it behind his back. But why did you find that so unusual? Isn't it normal for a man to pen a will when he knows his death is nigh? Yes, that's true, but there were special conditions to Asogi's incarceration, you see. What sort of conditions? Well, even though he was held in a cell designed for condemned inmates, he was allowed to keep his personal effects with him, with one exception. Really? He was allowed his things? That is unusual, certainly. Of course, he'd been convicted of killing 5 members of the aristocracy. But at the same time, he was a guest in our country from the Empire of Japan. The powers that be were determined that his final day shouldn't be needlessly uncomfortable. And what was the exception you mentioned to the personal effects he was allowed. That's the point. He wasn't permitted to have writing materials. Specifically, no pens or paper. So, he was prevented from leaving any written record of what had happened to him. Yes, that was the long and short of it. I've no idea where he obtained that paper. Any writing materials would have been confiscated from him upon his incarceration. As I said, he hid the paper behind his back and then he pleaded with me.
What did you just hide behind your back?
Please turn a blind eye. This is my lifeline.
But you know it's against the rules.
You're the only person who's seen. If you just agree to keep quiet. Alright then. But what's on that paper? A last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. Not something you want to tell a prison warder, but okay. How can a will be a weapon? So I decided to pretend I'd seen nothing and let him keep his will. But then later, it just seemed to vanish without a trace. What? What do you mean, it vanished? It would seem that isn't the end of the story of this mysterious will. I was the only person who saw Asogi's will, but somehow it disappeared. It was after Asogi's execution, which was actually an elaborate jailbreak. The warders gathered up Asogi's possessions that were in his cell. They were all to be sent back to his family home in Japan, you see. To poor Kazuma-sama. And you're saying that it wasn't anywhere to be found among his personal effects? The will, I mean. That's right. Though I didn't search through them myself. But Governor Kaden was livid. He was screaming, "It can't have disappeared completely!" That doesn't quite make sense though, does it? In what way? Well, we'd understood that only Mr. Vigil was aware of the will's existence. In which case, how did the prisoner governor know to look for it? Oh yes, you're right! I really don't know how he knew. But it certainly seemed as though he knew of the will's existence from the outset. Only he didn't refer to it as a will. What did he say it was? The Asogi Papers. The Asogi Papers? I really can't tell you anything of the subsequent events. Because, well, of what happened. Your dismissal, and the way you blocked it all from your memory. I'd forgotten all this until today. I don't suppose it's relevant to the case, though. Well, anyway, thank you very much for sharing it with us, Mr. Vigil. We're very grateful. I'm afraid there's really little more I can tell you. My wife, Evie, should be here shortly, so I do hope I don't appear rude, but what will become of you now? Well, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offense, of course. I imagine that once I'm fully recovered, I shall be arrested. I'm so sorry. Don't be, please. This is all my own doing. I always knew that this day would come. Well, I wish you well. Goodbye, Mr. Vigil. Ah! Before you go, there's just one thing. Oh, yes? What is it? The Asogi Papers. I'd be very grateful if you'd make no mention of the things I told you about them. Presumably for some good reason? It's my understanding that their very existence is a closely guarded secret. If it became known that I'd remembered, well, it could be rather troublesome, I think. I understand. Some sort of will that Genshin Asogi penned just before his death, which the man himself claimed was his last weapon. I wonder, perhaps it had something to do with his plan to escape. If there's anyone who might know more about a document that Cosmo's father left behind, it would be Mr. Vigil's governor. Then we know precisely where we must go. Back to Barclay Prison. Yeah, I'm just gonna let him sulk. I think to say that he's been through enough is an egregious understatement. So we're just gonna go to the governor's office now.